welcome into the State of Purple in this State of Purple podcast. He's Jack Day. I'm AJ Mansour, and today, as always, we are brought to you by our friends at SodaStick and SodaStick.com. You can head over to SodaStick.com and get your Minnesota sports-inspired goods, including all that wonderful purple stuff at the bottom of our screen right now on this live stream. And you can get it for 15% off, Jack. Promo code KFAN at SodaStick.com. We both got our hats on, our Colorway Cheers Series hats on. We're living on a high right now because the Minnesota Vikings made history this last weekend. Most of you know by now. Most of you have been reveling in this victory, the historic biggest comeback in NFL history from 33 points down twice, not once, twice, 33-0 and 36. Wait, was it 30? Yeah, no, it was the one time because we got the touchdown. So 33-0, Jack. 33-0. They made this comeback, surpassed the 32-point comeback from a couple years ago. You were at this game, my man. Did you leave early?
Thankfully, I did not, and thankfully, some of the people around me did. So I actually had some more space to be celebrating. It was one of those games where, like, usually when I'm at the stadium now, it's like I'm a little bit more mellow. That's kind of why I like watching it in the comfort of my own home or with my dad, because we can be crazy together. But this was one that I mean, and rightfully so, in my opinion, because the entire stadium, I think, was going a little bit crazy. But this wasn't like high-fiving people. Like, this was one, there was another guy probably about my age sitting next to me, and we pretty quickly skipped from the high fives to some hugs pretty quickly, it was a lot of fun. Like I said to you before the show started, it was a tale of two completely different halves. I mean, I saw your article this morning. I can't imagine leaving the Miracle game and leaving this game. That would be terrible. And and you were in the building for both of them as well as myself. So probably, I shouldn't say probably, that was the best regular season game that I've ever seen, and probably most other people in that stadium have ever seen. And I was trying to think of my top three Vikings moments, and this one's probably two right behind the Minneapolis Miracle. And I think number three for me, going back when I think I was in middle school for this one, but I was actually in attendance for the Adrian Peterson 296 game as well, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, no doubt. I was at the Brett Favre, Greg Lewis, Oh My Heavens game. That was a fun one. That list, we're on the younger side of this organization and being fans of this team. So there are plenty of them for people who have followed this team longer than we have. But, man, that game, it was something else. Completely and entirely the tale of two different halves. I don't know what went wrong. Everything went wrong.
Yeah, everything.
I mean, it wasn't even the only thing that actually was decent, Jack, and this is a weird thing to say, was the defense. The defense did not play terrible. They allowed one touchdown, 7 points in that first half. 33 points were scored. Only 7 of them came from the offense of the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, you have a punt block, a pick six. You have all these situations where you get these points and a bunch of field goals, and the defense really was bend don't break. Got put in a bunch of tough positions and held the Colts to field goals, and then buckled down completely in that second half. Allowed one field goal, and that was it. Last points of the half came 36 points that got them to a point where now, they joke about, we heard this quote from Patrick Peterson, we're going to get some stops. You guys just have to get 5 touchdowns. I have to believe that there were some people in that locker room rolling their eyes at that comment, but it seems like more than not bought into it and actually went out. And once the trickle effect started, after that first drive in the second half, Jack, they went 3 and out, and it was 50 seconds. It wasn't even like a long, drawn-out 3 and out. The Vikings go 3 and out. I thought it was toast, and I was texting my wife, trying to coordinate some things for holiday situations and parties and stuff like this. I was telling her I was going to come home. I was going to, head out of this game. I'll cover it from the road, do what we need to do from Kohl's or wherever we're going. And I said, if they don't score here, I'm going to hit the road. And then they scored. And they scored, 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 and they ended up winning that game. Give me some takeaways. I mean, you were obviously there, so you were covering it, quote unquote, covering it in a different capacity, enjoying the game, enjoying the feel and the fans. What was it like in the stands? I know you were in a little special fancy suite, but you were out there, you were with the people. It didn't seem like too many of them actually left.
No, it really didn't. Like I said, there was a couple people in like my area that did leave, but I will say this, like, there's 3 different ways of watching a Vikings football game. I think being in the press box is one very different way. And then there's watching it on TV. And then there's one like actually the viewer point through a fan viewpoint. And I think all 3 of them they're drastically different. I mean, when you're at the game, there's spots where I was going back and kind of watching some of the film from this game, and it's like I don't even remember seeing that play happen. So maybe I was in the bathroom for some of it, but it's just a different feel. But I thought that was hilarious when I saw that Patrick Peterson nugget after the game. I think it was O'Connell that talked about it. Maybe Kirk did a little bit too, but
yeah.
All we need is 5 touchdowns. One, I will say Patrick Peterson and company kept his word with that defense. They shut down the Colts in the second half. And I had a little bit of fun with this morning because I had a gut feeling that I was right, but I wanted to confirm on this. 5 touchdowns is more than the Vikings have scored in a single game all season this year, let alone one half of football. So the confidence level is a little bit different. And I think you could tell that like after the first touchdown, even KJ Osborne had this look in his eyes. They showed him on the Jumbotron, and KJ Osborne looked like he wasn't like his head wasn't down. He wasn't pouting. Instead, he was like a little bit pissed off. It looked like we're going to do this. And
right.
KJ Osborne, what a game. We've kind of been waiting for a monster game out of him, I think, all season. It's kind of hard when it's hard to do that when you're, I don't want to say buried on the depth chart by Justin Jefferson and guys like TJ Hawkinson, Delvin Cook. There's so many playmakers on the offensive side of the ball, but Kirk Cousins in the second half is the highlight to me. And you can pull up the QBR that was negative with ESPN, and you can pull up some of these tweets, and I can't believe it. I tweeted something last night. Pete Bursich had a screenshot from ESPN that shows Kirk Cousins is now the record holder for the most yards thrown for in a single half with, I think it was 417 yards.
Right.
417 yards and 4 touchdowns. A quarterback doesn't just luck into that. That doesn't just happen. Right. Kirk Cousins was making some really good throws. There was the one, I think KJ Osborne actually dropped it, but there was one where he hucked it downfield, and it was a perfect throw to KJ Osborne. There was the one to Adam Thielen towards the end of the game that he threw on a rope to get them into field goal territory. I don't know. I wanted to start the show off there because I've seen a lot of negatives around Kirk Cousins, and I don't think it's fair because the entire 4 or 5 years that Kirk Cousins has been in Minnesota, his one knock has always been the guy can't win football games. All he does is stat pad, and he puts up good stats, and people want you to look at the stats and think he's good, but he's not because he's not a winner. And now he's 10-0 in one-score games. He leads the NFL, I think, with 7 comeback wins. And the last one was the biggest comeback in NFL history against what was previously the 3rd-ranked passing defense in the NFL. That doesn't happen by accident, and I think Kirk Cousins deserves a ton of credit for this comeback victory.
It was a situation where you have a team that finds themselves down 33-0 at half. They average 3.9 points per game in the third quarter. So this third quarter doldrum kind of halftime adjustment situation that we've talked about a couple times now, that they just can't do it. They figured out a way to do it. And it sounds like, listening to PA talk about this and some people that were closer to the team and might have had some conversations with some people, they just kind of threw out what they were doing, throw out the game plan, because clearly it didn't work in the first half on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. Stop trying to force the run. Shape up everything around the pass. If you have to get the ball to Dalvin because we want to get the ball to Dalvin, throw him a screen pass. That worked out okay. The defense brought some pressure. They were getting pressure on the quarterback. They brought a 0 blitz at one point, Jack. I mean, it was like I saw it happen. It was like, whoa, like what is this? This isn't Madden. This is the Minnesota Vikings. But they then go on to have their highest scoring third quarter of the entire season, 14 points. I mean, that's not crazy. Highest scoring third quarter of the entire season. Their highest scoring quarter period of the entire season with 22 points in the fourth quarter. And that ended up being the highest scoring game for them. I mean, this was a situation where they had to do something that previously had never been done. And they found a will. They found a way. And it leaves you with the weird feeling, Jack. This is the title of today's episode, the title of this stream right now. How should we feel about the Vikings' need to continue to make history? The history in this singular game, the biggest comeback in the history of because obviously we talk about feeling terrible about the way they played in the first half and great about the way they played in the second half. How do we feel about this being? This is 10 one-score wins now. History is repeating itself and writing itself new on that side of it as well. I think that tied the all-time record for most one-score games in a season, and they've won all of them. You're stuck in a point where you're excited that they won. They clinched the division. The playoffs are within grasp. The playoffs are there, but they're right around the corner, and now you can start shaping things a little differently. But how should this make us feel? Because it was a dominant half following an awful half. So it still is this kind of like, are these guys frauds? How are they going to do this? What are the playoffs going to look like? After you came down from your high from being at that game and you're able to look at this a little bit, did you feel better about this Vikings team or worse?
I think I feel about the same that I've felt all season, because in the best way that I think we can put it is just enjoy the ride. I don't think Vikings fans should necessarily have these super high hopes that they're going to go in this season and win a Super Bowl, but now it's guaranteed that they have a chance to do that. And I think sitting here, I think it's very important to just enjoy it. I told you before the show, I threw out the fraudulent word in a tweet for the first time explaining this team, but I will say that was when this team was down 33-0 at halftime, and I was having a little bit of fun. I was actually live tweeting. I didn't tweet as much in the second half. I was tweeting a lot more in the first half, and maybe that was just like getting some anger out on the keyboards on my phone. But
there wasn't anything else to do.
There was a lot of stuff to do in that first half. I was having so much fun live tweeting the amount of paper airplanes that I was seeing and ripped up playbooks that were being thrown down from the upper deck. My dad texted me because there was a paper airplane that actually made it on the broadcast about the 40-yard line.
Yeah.
And he didn't realize that I was already tweeting about this. And it was entertaining, but for the wrong reasons in the first half. I will say that. But the best way I can answer that question, I already said that I think you just have to sit back and enjoy the ride, because yes, it hasn't been the prettiest season, but at the end of the day, the Vikings are still 11-3 now, and they clinched the NFC North, and they're going to have at least one home playoff game. And that doesn't happen too frequently in the state of Minnesota, not even just as a Vikings follower, but all for sports. It's not an easy thing getting a little bit of home field advantage in terms of the playoffs for this state. So just enjoy it, have some fun with this team. And I think at this point, you just got to stay on for the ride.
Right. We talk about the struggle through the first half. Justin Jefferson felt that struggle in the first half, but he ends the game with 12 catches for 123 yards. That's 2 yards behind the pace that we're talking about to get him to the 2,000-yard mark on the season. So he'll be okay. He's going to find a way to make up those 2 yards some way. But the conversation has shifted with Justin because he continues to get these just monster hits, and he catches the ball every freaking time. I'm not sure how he does it, but he's getting absolutely hammered. The other team is, I don't want to say they're like maliciously targeting him, but they are trying to make him remember what it felt like last time you came across the middle and got this catch. We're going to hit you hard, and we're going to hit you. The one arguably this last weekend should have resulted in a thrown out of the game because he left his feet and went helmet to helmet. That I don't know how it wasn't, but the conversation with Justin has shifted from can he get to 2,000 yards to when are we going to put that to the side and rest him to get prepared for the playoffs? We have this situation now where the Eagles are not out of reach, but they're continuing to do this. We're fending off the 49ers. Jalen Hurts might not play. Those are my fantasy team's chagrin. I was on bye this week and lost my best player maybe. But this conversation about Justin resting, that's the bigger picture, right? It's more important to maybe have him healthy for the playoffs. But this 2,000-yard thing, I mean, maybe he can do this in the next 2 games. The Giants and the Bears, is that what it is?
Yep, I think it's Giants, Packers, Bears.
Giants, Packers, Bears. Okay, so Giants and then the Packers. And Lambeau's going to be cold, but if you got to have a 200-yard game. Let's get a 200-yard game. We don't have to worry about this. We can feel good about it, and we can have the best of both worlds. Get that record and rest him. But it's probably pretty important that we rest him going to the playoffs.
Yeah, you tell him that. It's going to be fun seeing if he's going to be willing to actually sit on the sidelines for those games, especially with, like you said, San Francisco kind of clawing their way up. I think they're just a game behind, and I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, they would have the tiebreaker over the Vikings as well. I wanted to say something kind of going off of that, this wide receiver room is tough. Justin Jefferson, the term diva is so frequently thrown at wide receivers, and it kind of ticks me off because a couple years ago we heard all this stuff about Stephon Diggs, and I don't know if you followed along with the storyline with that little boy. I think his name's Aiden. I could be wrong on the name, but phenomenal. It just shows how good of a dude that Stephon Diggs is, and I wanted to bring that up on the show super quick today.
Hang on. Yes, that was awesome. You can still be a good person and be a diva, though.
That's very true. I don't disagree with that. He can be, but I think there's
a good person.
I think there's players on the Vikings currently that don't necessarily get that same treatment. That
sure.
I mean, if throwing your helmet on the sidelines is considered a diva, I think there's another Minnesota fan favorite, homegrown talent that you could also throw those words around. And I don't want to start calling people divas because, like I said, I don't like using that word. But
when you push yourself out of town because you're not happy, you're forever diva.
True. That I agree with.
But that kind of takes it. Yeah.
I just want to say there's kind of like a weird narrative towards a position where that happens more frequently.
Sure.
And I think watching the wide receivers on this team, specifically Justin Jefferson and KJ Osborne, the way that they fight for extra yards and the way that Justin Jefferson gets absolutely rocked and holds on to the football, it's impressive because you don't see that too often. There's a couple plays where KJ Osborne in that game, the yak that he picked up, he was fighting until the last centimeter that he could get. And I love that because you just don't see that always. Yeah. And he was moving and like, he almost moves like a stocky running back when he has the ball in his hands. And that's very entertaining, but I wanted to ask this question before we were to wrap up the show, because I wanted to go back to the Kirk Cousins stuff one more time. And I wanted to ask you this. If this were a quarterback that's sitting in the MVP conversation right now, if this is Jalen Hurts that does this to the Colts, or if this is Patrick Mahomes that does this to the Colts, what is the media saying about that team compared to the Minnesota Vikings? Because Kirk Cousins has now done this 7 times this year. And you and I have both kind of we go with the roller coaster with Kirk Cousins. We have the ups and downs, but I think at the end of the day, I think we're both grateful that for the time that he's been in Minnesota, and we think he's good enough to get the job done. And I don't think he's getting the credit that he deserves from the national media. And I think the fraudulent tag comes because of Kirk Cousins at times when in all reality, it really should be, hey, the defense and some of the things that happen. I know the defense had its ups and downs in the last game as well, but I just don't think it's quite fair. And I think it's time that Kirk Cousins gets a little bit more respect put on his name.
Yeah, I mean, we see it day in and day out here, right? So we see the good and the bad of it. Clearly, there are some reasons why the national media will jump all over him. And some of those are warranted from the past more so than now. But you see what he's doing now, and I think we look at it under a microscope when the nation looks looks at it through SportsCenter lens. And SportsCenter doesn't cover the Vikings very much. I mean, this game was historic, and it didn't even lead SportsCenter because the Buffalo-Miami game was a little more attractive, that night. So
the Raiders-Patriots game that was somehow found a way to end crazier than the biggest comeback in NFL history.
The whole weekend was crazy. But yeah, you have that. But you're right. I mean, statistically speaking, he's not blowing us away this year, but the way that his grit, his leadership, and the way that he has found a way to get over the struggles, that's the biggest change I've seen this year. Is we've seen Kirk games where Kirk has a bad first half and Kirk melts down. Like it just extrapolates and snowball effect, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and the problems continue. And more often than not, it's not, all on its own. There are some situations where he still struggles, but more often than not this year, he's found a way to mentally get past that, to work through it. It's resulted in wins. 11 of them, aren't all his responsibility, but at the same time, a handful of them are because he stepped up and he played well and he overcame some other deficiencies for this team elsewhere. We can't look, even the interceptions this weekend, they looked bad on TV, but they weren't really his fault. It was Jalen Reagor both times. The second one clearly where he stopped running the route because he just didn't see the ball, didn't know it was thrown his direction, and just kind of quit on the play. And the first one was his fault as well too. And they had a little conversation and talked their way through this. And his leadership abilities are what is going to help this team take the step further into potential playoffs this year. The talent's always been there, right? The talent's always been there. He's not necessarily padding the stats in garbage time, because there is no garbage time when you have 10 games that are within one score. They just don't have garbage time. So you can't pad the stats that way. You can't do that. You have the opportunity then to lead your team to wins and lead your team through the tribulations. And that's what I see more from him. And I think that however you want to look at that as far as measuring MVP votes, I'll measure that right now over, quarterback rating and rushing touchdowns, as long as the wins are there, right? 11 wins. If it comes with 11 wins, I'll take this over the past Kirk, who is throwing for tons and tons of yards and tons of high percentage passes, because that wasn't getting points on the board. That Kirk wasn't getting points on the board. Maybe between the 20s, it would move the ball really well, and then we'd miss a field goal or whatever it was, because that's what we do. But I'll take this Kirk any day over the other Kirk.
I agree with you 100%. I have had this written down. I think Kevin O'Connell has something to do with that, and I think he essentially has unleashed a new version of Kirk Cousins. And we say this, and I'm very guilty of it too, and I just think it's funny. I was looking at this week. We've talked about how he's not quite having the year that we're used to seeing in Minnesota yet. Just confirm this with the stats. He's 6th in passing yards and top 5 in passing touchdowns now. And we're talking about Kirk Cousins having a down season here in Minnesota, and he's still lingering around the top 5 in both of those categories. I know there's other ones. I know he's up there towards the top of the charts in interceptions, but again, it's the millionth new offense he's learned in his career, it feels like. And like I said, I think he deserves a lot of credit. And there's people out there that are saying, well, Delvin Cook got all those yards and scored that touchdown for Kirk Cousins at the end of the game. That's good coaching. You're supposed to find ways to make your quarterback look better, and I think we're finally starting to see that. So, like I said, Kirk Cousins deserves a lot more respect for the season the Vikings are having this year. And I did want to switch to the other side of the ball super quickly, because I know you got to get out of here. Duke Shelley, number 1 rated PFF Viking from Saturday's performance, which is exciting. I think he had 3 tackles, 2 pass breakups, and he's 26 years old. The Vikings secondary is kind of, I don't want to say forming for the future, but you have a 26-year-old that's starting to play a little bit better. And then you have 3 players that are all on IR right now that you used 3 top 4 round draft picks on coming back into the building next year. I think that's exciting. And just because I'm a draft nerd and I know there's a lot of people bashing this draft class, Brian Asamoah continues to see more playing time, and he should have had, or at least been in on, a forced fumble that led to another touchdown. And I know you have to get out of here quick, so let's just not talk about the ref situation for too long, because
we went through the whole situation. We didn't mention the refs.
Oh my! I don't even want to talk about that, because the
game should have been different. We'll leave it at that. I don't know if you knew this, but Hicks was benched for Asamoah. This was not an injury situation, because Hicks was playing special teams after this. So this was like a healthy scratch. You're just getting benched because this player is playing better or fits today better or whatever it was. So at some point in that game, Hicks got benched for Asamoah. So this was not an injury situation, because he continued, like I said, to play on special teams. So that's there. The ref situation, we don't need to go into that, but it's getting a little bit ridiculous. Cam Dantzler too. You mentioned the young players that are up on this team. Cam Dantzler I don't think he got a snap, did he?
I don't think so.
He was active, but I don't think he saw a snap. So still not fully healthy enough. So we get him back healthy this week. Hopefully you have this opportunity then for these young guys to get these repetitions that are, like you said, going to pay off into the future. That's going to be big for this team. You got to go out and do something against these Giants. Make us feel better. You got to go out and just blow these guys out of the water. This is not a good football team. 7 wins or whatever it is, they're gross wins. They're just disgusting. Like, you have
Are you talking about the Vikings or the Giants?
Jack, come on.
Sorry, I had to do that.
You got it. But would you agree? This is a statement.
This is a statement type performance where maybe you shut the national media up a little bit, and
it's going to be a statement either way. You either shut them up or you validate their opinions.
Very true. And I think this is a game where I think the Vikings have a legitimate chance at maybe they win by 9 points in this one instead of 8 points. So I think there's a chance that we'll say dominate and win by more than 8 points in this one.
That right there, Jack, is a 2-possession game. That'll work. All right, Jack. Fun stuff. Glad you enjoyed the game, and looking forward to another, hopefully, victory this weekend against the Giants. And
if you're going, we should probably mention this because I've seen it all over Twitter, and I don't want people to forget that because it's pretty cool. If you're going, wear white. They're trying to do the whole white out ordeal, and they're wearing the all white unis too, which is I always think that's one of the cleanest looks that they have. So
yeah, no, it'll be sweet. It will be sweet. All right. Enjoy the ride, like Jack tells us. Enjoy the ride. Don't worry too much about it sitting, benching, records, playoffs. Enjoy the ride. So we'll enjoy this weekend, Jack, just because you told us to. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas, everybody, too. This might be the last time we see you because of holiday situations before that. So enjoy your weekend. Hopefully you have some time off and take us with you. State of Purple Podcast. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Take a little walk to the edge of town and go across the track.